Universe podcast, a monthly YA lit podcast hosted by Dawn and Elise Martinez, YA librarians from the Chicagoland area. Each episode features reviews and rants on new and upcoming YA books. We are here to help you navigate your TBR pile, what's good, what's bad, and everything in between. I'm Elise, the rejecter of romance.
And I'm Dawn, the criticizer of books.
So turn up the volume, here we go. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Novel Universe podcast. We are taking a break from our Read Along with the Universe right now to bring you our top 10 realistic contemporary fiction YA novels of the 2010 decade.
Yes.
So,
all of that.
All of those things. We're going to start from number 10 and move our way up to number 1, obviously, so that the anticipation builds, you know, and you can see what we've chosen. Our lists are different. If you listen to our fantasy podcast, where we ranked our best to, not worst to best, but like all of our bests, we made one list, and this one is our own titles.
Yeah,
so
we read different contemporary.
Yes, very different.
Sometimes we read the same fantasies. All right, so we're going to start with our criteria and how we chose our list. So if you've heard other podcasts, this is Dawn, by the way. Hello. I'm the criticizer of books, and I wear that proudly, as Goodreads has said. My rating average is a 3.3. Thanks a lot.
That's low.
But when I read realistic fiction, I need to be moved. So I need to either cry or be inspired, or laugh, think about life. There needs to be some movement here. I like new voices. I don't like to read the same character over and over again. I like a lot of themes. And I prefer a prosy book with a lot of metaphors and flowery language. I don't like a straightforward way of telling a story. So that's why I chose the books that I chose. Mm-hmm. How about you?
Yeah, very similarly for me. I like a book to be thematically rich. Don't like, not like over the top, but I want a couple good ones that really anchors your plot. I am the rejecter of romance, so if there is romance in this book, it needs to be well developed. It needs to be absent of any sniff of insta-love. And I want good character development, so even if there's not a romance, which obviously I prefer, I want characters that, again, are not Mary Sue's. They're not one-dimensional. They're not surface level. That's probably my biggest thing, the character development.
Yeah.
And similarly to what Dawn says, I want to learn something. I want to be inspired. I want to experience a voice that is not mine. I mean, we read to learn, and we read to kind of like live vicariously through people, and like this is just one of the beauties of reading. So if you did not do that with your book, you've wasted my time.
Yeah. I forgot to mention one too. A book that stays with me, because I just finished a book a couple days ago and I could not tell you those characters' names, but I remember the names of these books that I read like 5-6 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it has to stay with me somehow. The characters, the world, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yes, something needs to move with you into the next reading experience.
All right.
Let's start with number 10. You can go first.
Okay. So I didn't start reading YA really until like 2013. So that's kind of where my books start. And my number 10 is actually Patron Saints of Nothing by Randy Rebay. I read that this year. We did a full review a couple podcasts ago, so you can like listen to our total review if you like to. I chose this book because I think I initially gave it a 4.5. I didn't particularly think the main character's voice was new, but I think what stuck with me is the way Rebay portrayed the character that had died. He wasn't even really on the page. He had died within like the first chapter. And I like the book because it is a contemporary in that it's taken place in the Philippines, where what's his name, Duarte is in power. And although, is it June is the boy who's died?
June is the one that has died, and Jay is the one.
June he's died in the circumstance of where he lives, but this could be a real teen's voice. And I thought that June was a wasted teen because he had a lot to say about life. He could have been great, but because he was addicted to a drug that all he needed was some help to fix it. He could have been great, he could have done great things, but he was killed for it, and it's just sad. And it really happens. Like, these kids, they can do so many great things, but their life is just cut short over something stupid that you could have been helped. And so I thought I liked June a lot, and his character really stayed with me. So that's why I chose that one.
Those are good reasons. I also have that on my list, but it's a little higher up.
Okay.
So my number 10 is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is first on my list because it is also a thriller / mystery. So it's not straightforward realistic contemporary in like what I consider to be, where it's not just, where it's mostly character driven. I put this book on this list because I thought it had a really relevant and compelling portrayal of things like anxiety, social anxiety, academic pressure, which I think is something a lot of teens feel in their daily lives, in terms of like, I need to be the best, I need to get the best grades, I need to have a successful career, and like they're just thinking about it a lot. And so I like that she kind of put a lot of these relevant modern day teen struggles into a murder mystery that takes place at a sort of like a boarding school for teens with really special niche interests and skills. And that was just really interesting to read about. This main character, her name is Stevie. Forgive me if that's not her name. I'm not good with names. You're like, I need to remember the character's name. I was like, ooh, full disclosure. But she, her skill is that she's a sleuth, and she's obsessed with solving this mystery this death that took place at the school. But yeah, for me, it was the portrayal of like social anxiety and things like that I thought was really compelling about this story. So it's again Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson.
All right. My number 9 is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. I originally gave this book a 3.5 when I first read it, and that was because, I'll tell you why. Because I was loving it, and I hated the ending, and I did this thing where I just did like a gut rating where I was just like, 3.5, I hated that ending. But then after I like thought about it and like talked about it with other people, I was like, I made a rash decision. So I probably bumped it up to like a 4.25 or something, but...
That's still low.
It is low. However, 90% of the book was great. I liked the way this book is kind of old. I don't know how old it is, but
2015,
okay.
14,
around there, somewhere. It's essentially about twins, Jude and Noah, and we meet Jude and Noah when they're 13, and then we meet them when they're 16, and then as the book progresses, we find out what has happened to them. And I liked it a lot because the themes in this book were real. It was about this family who were just eating each other alive with jealousy and secrets and lies, and it just tore this family apart. And one moment that stuck with me, and I think it was when Jude is the girl, she was 13 and she's going out to this party, and her mom says to her, "Is that the girl you want to be?" And that was kind of the last thing her mom said to her. And I think all girls kind of get that, damn, mom, that's awful, why would you say that about me? That really stuck with me when she asked her daughter that. But it's a really good book. If you haven't read it and you really like serious teen issues, I highly recommend it. It's I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson.
Mm-hmm. That's also on my list.
We should talk about it. I mean, I know
also
it's not,
higher
but jump
up.
In.
Well, is it weird though? Because then it's like out of order for me. It's fine. I won't say too much more than what you say.
But I mean, we could discuss it even though it's on your list. So,
all right.
Like,
if you have more titles, I will pop in. And
you don't have anything else to say? Wow.
Well, let's see. I'll Give You the Sun. I appreciated this book on a personal level because it was very artistic, and I liked how both of the teens had like very different creative interests. It was just an interesting book for me to read, and I started reading YA a little bit after Dawn, more like 2014, and this book was handed to me probably by you. I think you were like, you need to read this. And this was the first YA book that I read that I think had any substance. Because before then, I was reading, like, dystopia and, like, Matched and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Because the subject matter was interesting, but like in terms of like themes and character development, it was not as intense as this one. And so for me, this book was like the pinnacle of this is what YA has the potential to be. And that's why so there's genuine romance in that book, there's genuine character development, there's genuine growth. I mean, there's grief, as you mentioned, with the mother dying, and like this book just had everything without being over the top and stuffed with nonsense. Yeah. It was like, holy shit, this is good writing.
Nonsense, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head, but I loved the characters in this book. Jude and Noah were like the first real intense heroines and heroes that I read in YA.
I think you're next.
Yes, I am. All right, number 9 for me is Exit Pursued by a Bear. And I read this one a while ago. It follows a girl named Hermione who is co-captain of her high school cheerleading squad, and when they are at a cheerleading retreat, she is drugged and raped. And the book follows her her journey to deal with it and find support and, you know, deal with the fallout of what it did to her and her life. And this book was a very unique read for me because I had to pull up my review to be like, what did I originally think about this book? I was bored. And it's because this girl, she's raped. She feels that she has enough support in her life with her parents. She, at one point, goes to, like, a pastor. And really everybody in her life gives her good advice, doesn't make her feel slut-shamed, doesn't make her feel bad. And I'm thinking to myself, this is really boring. And then I had to understand that I think that was what not that the author was intending to bore the reader, but that a book about rape is not supposed to be this, like, salacious, like, gossip type tabloidy bullshit that you are frankly expecting.
Yeah.
And yes, it's a mystery in that I don't think we know who the rapist is until the end. I can't remember.
But it's not a big deal.
Right. So I go into this book expecting, oh, who is it? I want to know, like, what happens? Does he, like, follow her and cause, like, why am I expecting that? And so for me as a reader and as a woman, it really showed me that, like, rape is not this, like, plot device, and it's not this thing that is used for entertainment or, like, it is. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, it does.
And when I realized that I think that was what she might have been trying to do with this book, I was like, and 4.5 stars for you. So that's number 9 on my list. Yeah. That's by E.K. Johnston. Sorry, I didn't say the author's name.
That's not on my list, but I like that book a lot. And we read this book with our teen book club, and some of them were kind of like you. They're like, this is boring, and then we had to explain to them, sometimes you need to kind of change the way you think as you're reading a book, you know, based on what the author's trying to say to you. But I even down to the cheerleading, how she specifically chose cheerleading because it's a team sport, and this girl experienced something that happened to her by herself. And
I think that unfortunately cheerleaders have a certain like cliched stereotype representation.
Yeah.
And I think she was just trying to really spin everything on its head. Like, cheerleaders are not vapid. Cheerleaders don't deserve to be raped because they're wearing a specific type of outfit or because they're doing a specific activity or, like, you know, just, like, things that you don't realize you believe until you're confronted with them. Mm-hmm. So I like that about this book a lot.
That was a good book. If you haven't read that, it's a good book, too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, my number 8 is Spontaneous by Aaron Starmer, I believe is his name. I probably should have done research like that more. I really like this book. This is an underrated book. Not a lot of people read it. I believe it was like 2015, 16 pub. It's essentially about these group, there's one main character, but she's a high school senior. And the seniors in this school are spontaneously combusting. Whether you take that to be literal or figuratively, that's up to you as the reader. But I thought it was an interesting choice because when you're a high school senior, life changes. You are going to school and to college, and your friends are going to a different college. So you're leaving your home, you're leaving your friends. Maybe you didn't get into college, and so that's a huge life development for you, especially if you were trying to get there or you didn't get to the one you wanted to go to. You have to get a job and make your own wage and get a home and get a car. Like, it's huge life changes. So he kind of chose high school seniors as this backdrop. And every teen has, like, typical teen stuff. Like, there was a couple that was an interracial couple. There was some kids that were drug abusers. There were some kids that were really, really high achievers. And then there was a girl, the main character, she was not a high achiever. She was just kind of, living her life. She wasn't college bound, but her best friend was. And so as these teens are combusting, the community is like, what's going on? Is it the drug abuse? Is it a government conspiracy? Is it violence, gang violence? Like, they don't know why they're trying to rationalize it. But I sort of came up with my own thing, and I could be wrong, but that's what's great about this book, is that you could have a really good discussion as to why these kids are combusting. And I chose to think of it as, because they're high school seniors and they're dealing with real life issues, maybe her best friend combusted because she's going away to college and she's leaving her friend behind. So she just left. She didn't die. Or you could see it as she died. You could take it literally and they spontaneously combusted. But it's a really good book. It's supposed to be made into a movie. That was like a couple years ago. I doubt that it's going to happen at this point. But it's a really good discussion book. If you are a librarian and you have a teen book club, I highly recommend it.
Yes. I need to read that one.
Yeah.
It's like on my retirement list.
Oh,
but you know how
go.
that goes. I have this list that I say.
If I had a dime for every time you said that.
I know. I have a list that I'll get to it when I retire. All right, so my number 8 is called A Heart and a Body in the World. This was a Prince honor for this past year. This is by Deb Coletti. I liked this book because of the themes and ideas that she explores inside of her narrative. I didn't necessarily find this like an interesting book in terms of the plot. It features a girl named Annabelle who has decided to run cross country from Seattle to where her dad lives in, I believe, Washington, D.C. Not really something I'm particularly interested in reading about. However, she uses this like running as a metaphor, obviously, for like figuring out this trauma that she has dealt with in her past. And the book was structured in a way that made the pacing really solid. So we don't find out what happened to her until, obviously, more towards the end of the novel. But this was another one where the support around this girl who had experienced, and she doesn't say if it's like sexual in nature or if it's just violence or whatever, which is kind of interesting. She kind of lets the reader maybe imbue their own experiences or their own, traumas, onto this character, just to get you thinking about why we feel these way about things. So what I liked about this book is that she uses Annabelle's situation to get female readers to see and ask ourselves why we interact with the opposite gender the way we do. So for example, Annabelle is constantly thinking about how she feels guilty that maybe she like encouraged this person to react to her in the way that he did. And so she says, why are girls taught that we need to be wary of 50% of the human population, but at the same time be sweet, sensitive, ingratiating, and kind? And what happens when we get those messages confused? When we catch the attention of someone who misinterprets a smile, a hug, an expression of friendship, who's the guilty party? So I really liked that, of like just kind of going into the responsibility, if there is any, of women versus men, and like, I don't know, it was very well done. I personally understand why it got a Prince honor, despite the fact that this book had like basically zero visibility throughout last year. Like, no one was really talking about it, but this is a really good book to hand off to your teens, especially in obviously like the Me Too time, and just anyone who's interested in like thinking about deeper interpersonal relationships. So that's A Heart and a Body in the World by Deb Coletti.
Cool. Number 7 for me was Challenger Deep by Neil Shusterman. This book was a tough book. It's a tough book in that I don't know what teen to give this book to. I think a lot of teens might be a little bored, especially considering Neil Shusterman's body of work. His books tend to be heavy on action, and it's good action, but it moves, it's fast paced, whereas this book was really slow. I chose this book because it was about a boy who was schizophrenic, and I don't know anyone who's schizophrenic. I am not schizophrenic, but it's interesting, and you don't know what's going on in their head, and this book is kind of a glimpse of what that is like. So I learned something new. I was confused throughout most of the book, but then as it cleared up, I was like, oh wow, that was really interesting the way he laid out his story. So I'm not gonna really go into much into it. You really can't say too much because it's a weird book. But
it's a weird book.
Yeah, Challenger Deep by Neil Shusterman. It's a heavy book, and it's hard to get through. It's tough. So yeah, you have a really solid book club, or you really are into learning about mental, what's it, a disorder? A
mental disorder, I believe so. Yeah.
I never really get that wrong. Yeah.
Okay, my number 7 is When I Was the Greatest by Jason Reynolds.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I really enjoyed this book. I did not write a very lengthy review on Goodreads. Thank you, past Elise. So I'm going to kind of try to cobble this together here because I couldn't really remember like any of the characters' names and stuff again, but it follows a boy named Ali, and he is into boxing. He's like... Yeah, he's raised in Bed-Stuy, New York. But what I liked about this book is the relationship that he had with his father and like the importance of family. And this was the first YA book. I mean, Jason Reynolds is huge now. This was his debut. I think he kind of did a lot for the genre in terms of like, this is the culture that I grew up in and this is the culture that I want to share with the world. And that it jumps off the page in this book. Like, it was a very atmospheric story. Read it. I read this 4 years ago, and I'm so mad that I did not write a review. Yeah. When was it published? Yeah, 2014. January 2014, which means that we probably read it in the winter of 2013.
Yeah, we had the arc.
Yeah, but I just remember going to see him speak about this book with a couple of other authors in Milwaukee, and it was like, you're going places.
Yeah, he was with 2 others that he was with John Corey Whaley, who was, I think he was
at the time. Yeah, at the time. Yeah,
he was the headliner, and that other guy, Brendan Kiley. And I think he was debut too.
He was also a debut, and I think he and Jason Reynolds were like possibly in the process of working on their next book together, or maybe they met on that tour, and then they were like, "Hey, let's get together and write something." Because you're right. Now that I'm saying that came out way later.
Yeah, we met him when he was nothing.
Yeah,
Jason Reynolds was nothing.
That room was a very small book room, like a bookstore. It was really.
It was a lot of teens there. We were one of very few adults, and everyone was just like, wow. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, Jason Reynolds everywhere. We're like, oh,
yeah, he blew up fast. He blew up really fast. But yeah, When I Was the Greatest, his debut is a really solid look into inner city life and like challenges the cliches of that culture and life, and just like I loved the portrayal of the importance of family.
All right. My number 6, I wonder if this is on your list. We Were Liars by E. Lockhart.
No.
It is not. Okay.
No, but I do like that book a lot.
Yeah. This is a polarizing book. You either loved it or you hated it. Clearly I loved it because I gave it a 5 and it's number 6 on my list.
I couldn't have guessed.
Could you? I like this book because, once again, it was kind of weird. You weren't sure what was happening. It starts off with this girl. She has amnesia. She doesn't know what happened. And she's got some mental blockage going on. But one thing I liked that E. Lockhart did was she incorporated adults in her book, and her mother and her aunts and her grandfather had this toxic relationship and she kind of compared it to like King Lear and all these other little fairy tales, and it was kind of interspersed between the main characters' chapters. And the moms and the aunt were just vying for this man's attention, and it seeking your parents' attention is not something that stops when you turn 18. You're constantly doing that as an adult. So I liked how she interwove that dynamic with the adults, and also that grandfather was such a douchebag. He was an awful person. And then it had some racial issues going on, and this family was affluent, and even though you're affluent doesn't mean your problems are non-existent. It was kind of a mystery. It was sad. It had lots of things going on, and I I enjoyed reading all of it.
Yeah.
And it had that prosy, metaphorical language that I like a lot.
It was a very dreamy, atmospheric book, because that serves the purpose of ultimately like where the plot ends up. Yeah, that was a very good book. I forgot about that one.
Yeah. And I kind of started living my life as I don't suffer fools. It's kind of like the motto of that book. And I met E. Lockhart, and I had her write that in my book. Because I don't suffer fools. I don't have time for your bullshit. It's like I don't have time for that. So I love that theme in that book.
Yeah. All right, my number 6 is Patron Saints of Nothing by Randy Rebay. I won't go too much into it just because Dawn really already did, but you said something that I have to disagree with.
Okay.
You said that you didn't necessarily
like his
feel...
voice.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I loved Jay's voice, and in fact, that's the reason why I gave it to another coworker to read, because I was like, I don't know, I just felt that the character arc from where he begins in the beginning of the story to where he ends up at the end was very well done. I like the way that the author writes Jay's voice with this like vulnerability and this, he's very honest with himself. Mm-hmm. He's like, I did not care about anything except girls, and that shallowness cost me a relationship with someone who could have really meant something to me, and that was his cousin June, who died. And that is a very harrowing experience to undergo when you're a teenager, and I thought it was extremely well written. I also really liked this book because it's very timely in the fact that the villain of this book is kind of one of the characters, or Jay's relative. So it's like, we kind of live in this day and age politically where like our family members who don't agree with us politically are we sit at these Thanksgiving dinners and we listen to them spout off these really dangerous political views, and it's like, what do we do with that? And I like that he kind of shows teens, here's how to grapple with that experience. Here's how to stand up for yourself, and here's how to stand up for the truth of the matter, and maybe introduce a different point of view and perspective. And I just thought that was a really, really important thing to throw in the book. But mostly for me, it was about just the growth of Jay, and I liked the non-romance, but kind of a romance. I liked learning about Filipino culture because I'm not Filipino. I don't know anything about that. I had no idea this was going on. So that was a big thing for me. I learned something. In fact, when I started reading it, I was like, did this take place in the 80s? I was like, this can't be happening
now. It seems like it.
Yeah, dude.
No.
I was like, what? This is a real thing that is happening? And how is this not on the news all the time? Just people are able to walk around shooting people because you're a drug addict? Like, what the hell? So that was shocking to me. But yeah, this is one of my top of the year. I'm sad that this book is not getting more like hype and visibility.
I think it will now.
I hope so, because you did mention it was long listed for the NBA.
Yeah,
so.
And I would like to go on record as saying I called that.
We did.
When we originally reviewed it back in August, July, whenever it was June.
Earlier, yeah.
Yeah.
I think this book was
I think it's going to make the short list, guys. It's going to make the short list, and I think it's going to be a Prince winner.
You heard it on the Novel Universe first. All right, go ahead.
All right, my number 5 is The Serpent King by Jeff Zentner. I'm pretty sure everyone knows what this book's about. This was a standout. I mean, everyone knows Jeff Zentner. I mean, he is like prolific in the YA. Everyone loves him. Everyone knows him. Okay. This book stood out because he actually wrote about religion in his book, which you don't get a lot of in mainstream teen, unless it's Christian fiction, sure. But this is like quote-unquote mainstream teen fiction. And the main character's father is a pastor, and he's in prison for doing something. I won't say what. But...
Are we not giving spoilers?
No. Especially some of the newer ones. Maybe like, some of the older ones, sure. Okay. You should have read them by now, people. I liked all of the characters. I thought Dill was a tough character. I felt so bad for him, and I liked how his father is in prison, and he goes to visit his father, and his father is just still spewing that garbage, Jesus, and even though he's guilty, the man is guilty, and doing awful things, and he just sits there and he listens, and then his mom takes up for his father, and he's just like, I work my ass off to provide for this family, and this is how you treat me. Like, these kids have some issues, And he has a couple friends who I thought were really well developed. And I particularly like the parents. Once again, adults are in this story. I like it when YA have adults present because teenagers have parents or a guardian, and they are present in their life. They are not by themselves most of the time, unless that story is about someone who, you know, has parental issues. But man, I cried, I laughed, I learned new things about religions that have serpents in them. I mean, who knew?
Religions that have serpents in them. That's phenomenal.
It was a great story. If you haven't read it, which I'm pretty sure you probably have, but if you haven't, pick it up. The Serpent King by Jeff Sentner.
Okay. This one you might be surprised to find on my list.
Oh wow. Fun. What is it?
This is More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera.
You read that?
I did. I loved this book.
Okay, I did too. It's higher up though.
Okay, well,
not much higher because we're on number 5.
Right, 5 is decent.
So we'll talk about it together.
Okay, it's halfway through my list. Good. I had never read anything like this before.
No, me either.
Oh man. First of all, it's like queer fiction, which I you know, not something I pick up often, but this was what that book had for me. It's about Aaron Soto. He's a teen that lives in the Bronx.
No spoilers though, because this is kind of old.
I know. Yeah. So I'm gonna just read my little thing because it doesn't have any spoilers. He's kind of a nerd, but he's like trying to keep it cool because he does live in the Bronx and he doesn't want to like show too much of himself. But one day his life changes when his dad commits suicide, and so he struggles to move forward. And is that a spoiler?
What? I don't think so.
That he attempts suicide?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. Right. Only to find out that he did not succeed. So this book is about him like deciding he wants to be happy and attempting to move on, but things just don't really go that way.
Yeah. As I was reading this book, I knew that it says, well, at least I don't know if it says that he is gay. I don't know. But I'm reading the book and he has a girlfriend. Yeah, and I'm I'm confused. Yeah. Like, what is happening? It was so confusing. And then that middle bit hits you and you're like, oh my God, it was devastating. But just even like him having to share this room with his brother and, you know, his mom, they have this like one room apartment and he has a tattoo of a smiley face on his wrist because that kind of reminds him to this is a good day. This is a happy day. And this is semi-autobiographical. I don't think I said that word right.
No, you did.
Okay. Because I do believe that Adam Silvera also has a tattoo of a smiley face.
Yeah,
on his wrist. I think it kind of cuts up it's over the where he tried to commit suicide, the smiley face. But it's just this poor kid is just so damaged. But by the end of the book, and at first I didn't know how I felt about the end of it, but you know, some things happen and his life is not a happy ending. And he's like, you know what? I'm living day by day and some days are more happy than not. And it was a great book. This was actually number 2 on my list. It was a wonderful book, and then when you meet Adam, you're like, oh my God, this is so great. Like, he's such a great guy, and he's got such a positive attitude, and you can totally tell that a lot of these things happened to him in his real life, but...
Yeah, I was not expecting the situation that happens in the middle of the book, and I remember sitting on my bed, I'm reading, I'm in my room, and I was just like, what? Like, expletives, and then I think I cried a little bit, and then just the sadness of, like, this thing that he tried to reverse, he just walked right back into. It's like, would that cycle continue for all of eternity? Like, this is like, oh my God. It was so well written. The way that this character is developed and portrayed to us is extremely vulnerable, and it makes sense because, again, it is semi-autobiographical. And you can just tell that this is a journey that was obviously really important to this author's life. But man, this book, it was a unique one. It sticks with you.
Yeah, that was...
This is one that I think I need to pass along. I think I need to revive this one.
Yeah. I say go for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna. That's gonna be my next one. All right, go ahead.
All right, number 4 for me is Eleanor and Park by, what's her name? Rainbow Rowell. This was one of the very first YA fiction books I read, realistic fiction books. And I'm not into romance, but I'm like, she was going to come to our library. She didn't because something happened, and I'm still upset about it. This was when she just published this book. So she hadn't won any awards yet. And she was not the headliner. It was some other lady that nobody knows about. Alison Noel. Like, exactly. Who is that? I know. That's mean. I'm sorry. But
she's just middle of the road, but yeah.
Just think about where we are now. Rainbow Rowell's huge.
Yeah.
But I like this book because she really, like, played opposites here. We have this Eleanor, who's a new girl. She's got frizzy red hair. She's a little chubby, and she's just trying to disappear. She does not want any attention. And then we have Park, who I believe he's half something. He's half white, half Asian. I don't know what.
Korean?
Maybe.
Is he Korean? Yeah.
And he's also just trying to fit in because he's got these a-holes around him like, hey, Park, do you know Kung Fu? And he's just like, oh, God, here we go. He has friends and everything, but he's just like trying to disappear. He like slumps down in the bus. He doesn't want people to talk to him. He has his headphones in, and here comes Eleanor. Nobody wants to sit with her, and he's like, oh, please don't sit with me. And she does, and that puts a spotlight on him, and we've all been there. Oh, we don't want that one person everybody talks about to be seen talking to you.
Don't make eye contact.
Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact. Scoot over a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then we have Eleanor, who comes from this awful home life. Her stepfather is disgusting. Her mom is just not great. And then we have Park, who has these loving parents, and they show affection outwardly. And like I said, Eleanor's stepdad is just awful. And then, but Park, he's kind of like living in his brother's shadow, and he's complaining about his dad being too like, but then you see Eleanor's dad, and you're like, oh my God, guy, come on, you know. So I like how she kind of did like opposites with these two characters, and just their found love of music and comics and TV. And it is a love story, and it's such a sad love story, but I love that ending. It's a beautiful book, and I still recommend it. Teens still love it. If you have not, I'm pretty sure you've read it. Like, she's still writing her romance and everything. And I'm pretty sure people have read her backlog, but if by chance you have not read it, Eleanor Park.
Get to it.
That's right.
All right, my number 4 is I'll Give You the Sun, which we have already talked about, so I won't wax poetic about that, except that it has great character development. The plot for me was interesting. Just a lot going on. So again, if you want to like go back into YA and read some good solid YA, pop in. I'll Give You the Sun.
She's written anything since.
I don't think she has. Oh, that's right. Don't
she's
remind
a good
me
writer.
Of that. Yeah, Jandy Nelson, if you're listening, please.
Because she's listening to our podcast.
Hey, man, we could dream. Yeah, that's so sad. That's so true.
Yeah.
Fuck. Well, all right. Number 4.
I think my number 3 might be your number 1. Sadie?
Yeah, my number 3 is your number 1.
Okay.
My number 1 is your number 3.
Yeah. Sadie by Courtney Summers. This was last year. This is our number 1 last. It was not my number 1 last year. I don't know. Maybe it was.
It was your number 1 last year.
Okay, it was.
I mean, yeah.
So we're gonna both talk about it. Okay. I think we can also go back into our older past podcasts and listen to our listen to our full review of the book. But
let's see.
Yeah, this book was not what I was expecting.
Hell no.
I was expecting a light romp of a murder mystery.
You were expecting a light romp?
I was not expecting but I wasn't expecting this dark ass shit.
No.
This was dark. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'll give you that one. I wasn't either. Yeah, dude, this book kicked my ass, and then it did again. I was sitting there reading this book, and I'm like, I don't know who I would give this book to, only because I could see this being extraordinarily triggering for anybody who has dealt with sexual abuse or like familial abuse or anything like that. Because like, oh my God, when I was reading this book, I wasn't having panic attacks, but I was feeling like physical reactions to the amount of stress in this girl's life. And that is successful writing.
Yeah.
Like, holy cow. And it's a tragic story through and through, but the humanity in you is like hoping and wishing and praying to the book gods for some kind of like positive outcome, especially because, you know, you've got this, the book is kind of told in 2 different linear like paths, if you will, I guess, narrative paths. One is this guy who is doing this serial inspired podcast about Sadie's story. And then the other is obviously Sadie and her actual story. So was the podcast kind of first in terms of like what is happening narratively? Okay. So you're kind of clued into what's happening to Sadie and like sort of like not really the current events, but then you move to her story and you're like, oh shoot, okay, so here's what actually happened during that moment, and the tension was out of control.
Yeah, it was. And one good thing that I like what Courtney did is that she builds this tense moment and you're like, oh man, it's so atmospheric, and then you expect the next chapter to kind of she makes you wait several chapters before you find out what happens, because you got to go back to the podcast and you're like, oh come on.
Yeah. And then the I don't know, just the character's voice was bizarre. It was like she wrote this character that really had nothing left. And you know, her existence was about keeping her sister safe. It was about survival. It was about she just had to let so much go, otherwise her pain, which was already immense, would be even more immense. And yet, I did not feel like I was reading this empty, vapid character.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, there was tension, there was substance, there was growth, despite the fact that we really don't know what happens to her in the end. Yeah, it was just, I've never read anything like that. And that last, like, quarter of the book was just, like, it picked up.
Yeah.
So it was entertaining to read, but it was also very difficult to read.
Yeah. It was a tough book, but it was important.
Yeah.
We've given this to teens. They loved it. Did we give this to teens? Did we do this?
I believe that we did this for a book club, yeah.
Okay. So if you haven't picked it up yet, this is also polarizing. People didn't quite like the podcast portion of it, but I did.
I thought it added a unique element to an otherwise not like straightforward or boring story, but it would have been very interesting without the podcast element. But I did like it. I thought it was relevant.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll date the book. I don't know. That's, I guess, what some people were saying, but
sure.
I don't agree as of this point. All right. What number was that? 3. All right. My number 3 is not even on your list, which I'm not surprised by based on our previous conversations.
Oh, God, I think I know
It's The Hate You Give.
Oh, no, I wasn't expecting that.
Oh, really? Okay. I really enjoyed this book because I just felt that it just presented a different experience to me than obviously the one that I have lived. It's about a black teen star who's trying to reconcile her life with the one that she has when she goes to school. Which person do I be? There's racial tension, obviously, racial identity. That is not something I struggle with, so this was a unique experience for me to read. Pretty much everybody knows what this book and story is about, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but this was, I would have to say, one of the top realistic contemporaries released in the past 10 years. So, end of story.
All right. My number 2 was More Happy Than Not, and we talked about it already. So.
Oh, wow. Moving straight along.
Yeah, I mean, we already talked about it. I can't say too
much more. There's nothing else you want to say? I mean, this is like...
I loved it.
Okay. My number 2 is Guts by Raina Telgemeier.
Okay.
I was like, I have to throw one graphic novel in there. I just read this because it was released in August, recently. I liked this book because of very personal reasons, and I think everybody who reads this will feel seen. Of like, most people, I feel like they discover their anxiety or like any kind of mental illness or whatever that they have when they're younger, you know. And so she's like 10 or 11 in this book, and that was right around the age that I didn't know what it was, but like I started to experience anxiety and panic attacks, and then like I ended up getting sick later, and like just that whole process of reconciling the fact that your life is different now because your mind or your body is not working the way you were told it should work. And that is a very frightening experience. You have to do a lot of like self-censoring and reorienting yourself both in school and at home, and like, so you see her go through that process with like, I don't know what I can eat now, I don't know what activities are going to be triggering to me, oh great, I have to present in school again. It's like, those were all things that set me off. So for me, it was like every page was just like, oh my god, I've literally experienced that. So I think this is a really important addition. All of her books are. I mean, every book that Raina Telgemeier publishes are very important to teens, whether she's talking about family relationships or just personal development. You know, this is a very important story for teens to have available to them and young, like, middle grade readers, because this is a book you can hand to someone and be like, here, like, find comfort in that you are not alone and there is help for this. And, like, that did not exist when I was that age, so I just thought I was, like, crazy. I just thought, something's wrong with me, end of story, I've got to figure out how to live with this now. And that is not healthy. So this book is a very important book in YA/middle grade. Cool.
I kind of want to give a couple of honorable mentions. It was tough for me to narrow it down. I do want to say a couple books that didn't quite make it, but I really loved them. Genuine Fraud by E. Lockhart. Invisible Landscape with Invisible Hand by, I'm looking at my book, Anderson. What's his name?
M.T. Anderson.
M.T. Anderson. And Free Verse by Sarah Dooley. I think that might be middle grade.
Who?
I know.
What the hell?
It might be middle grade. It's right on the cusp. It's an older book. It's called Free Verse by Sarah Dooley. I cried after every chapter.
I have never fucking heard of that book.
It was on my BFYE list. That's why I was like, it's one of those rando books.
Oh, wow. And it's in verse?
It is not in verse. Oh. Most of it is not. But then there are some points that are in verse. And it was really well versed.
Gotcha.
All right. So my number one. Do you have any predictions?
Oh, my God.
You already know. Because I haven't mentioned it yet.
Shit.
You don't know?
I thought Sadie was going to be your number one. No, I don't.
I'll give you the sun.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
The Sun is also a star.
Oh, damn it.
Too much suns. Too much suns.
Too many suns.
The Sun's also a star by Nicola Yoon.
Yeah,
this book came out a couple years ago.
I am shocked. And then I also feel shitty because I still have not read that book yet. Despite the fact that you were like, you have to read this.
I love this book. It's basically about, I mean, it was a movie. I haven't seen the movie because I'm afraid that it's going to be bad, and so I'm not going to watch the movie just because I love the book so much. But I like this book because it had so much going on, a lot of themes. And it all happens in a day where this poor girl, she's going to get deported, and she meets this guy. I hate that I can't remember their names. Oh my God. After all I said about me remembering names.
You're like, I never forget a name.
I know. It all happens in a day, and it's kind of this fate versus coincidence thing, and we have all these other characters that impact their story without even them realizing it, and the way she wove that into her story was beautiful. I liked that it didn't necessarily have a happy ending. It is a romance, but it had a realistic ending, which I appreciated. I sobbed throughout the whole ending. It was such a sweet story.
I cannot imagine you crying in a book. I'll just.
Are you kidding me? I sobbed. All these books I listed, I cried in all of them.
It takes a lot for me to cry in a book. I don't even think I cried in More Happy Than Not, and that book fucking tore me up.
You said you dropped a couple.
I drop a couple?
You said you did.
I mean, I think I might have. I mean, yeah, I probably did, but it doesn't happen often.
Okay.
But, okay.
Yeah. It just encompassed all the things. You know, I'm American. I'm not an immigrant, so I don't know what that's like. So I kind of learned something else about being an immigrant. She's from Jamaica, and then of course the other guy is a first
generation.
Thank you. So it was that thing going on, and I love Nicola Yoon's writing. I love a good quotey book.
A
quotey book, and Nicola Yoon is quite the quotey author, so I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I like a quotey book as well.
Yeah.
All right. So my number one is Sadie by Courtney Summers. We've already talked about this, so I won't go into it. But this book was gripping. End of story.
Okay. Maybe that's the title of the podcast. This book was gripping. End of story.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right, everyone. That is it for today's podcast. We will be uploading this later this week.
Yeah, probably Friday.
All right. Be on the lookout for our Read Along with the Universe episodes. We are doing every Sunday, and we're reading There Will Come a Darkness by Katy Rose Pool. We will see you in the next podcast.